Hi there, I'm Josh. I love making videos about older, cheaper keyboards, like this, and a personal favorite. But today we're going to try out what I think is one of the quintessential cheap, older keyboards, the Casio SK1. The SK1 came out in 1985, and even by then, Casio were no stranger to making these cheaper, small, toy keyboards. In a lot of ways, they were pioneers. While other manufacturers were building a whole keyboard dedicated to synthesis, Casio were able to fit it into just one button. SK1 stands for Sampling Keyboard 1, and yeah, it's an 8-bit sampler. When I say it's a sampler, you might be thinking of something like an MPC or SP device, but that's not really what we're talking about here. What you would do instead is you could take a sample up to I think 1.42 seconds and play it back chromatically along the keyboard after sampling it in either through the line in or through the microphone. And it's pretty straightforward. There's a little sampling button here. You just press it and it waits until it hears a sound loud enough. Ah! And it's finished sampling. Beautiful. And when you cycle the power off on the SK1, your sample is gone forever. Ephemeral. Why don't we check out what the SK1 has on offer? There's piano, trumpet, pipe organ, and jazz organ. The synth drums and the human voice are interesting because both samples have delay baked in. So you get these cool rhythmic variations when you hit a chord, since the SK1 can't change pitch without also changing the sample playback speed. The real standout sounds to me, though, are the brass ensemble and the flute. There's also that synthesizing button we mentioned before, which, according to the SK1 manual, recalls harmonic synthesized sound created using the synthesizing button. Okay, it's basic additive synthesis. It's kind of like having a little simplified organ inside a keyboard that is, and I have this on good authority, much smaller than most organs. Every now and again, Casio would have a feature on one of these toy keyboards that, at least to me, I think is a little more advanced than I would expect for something like that. On the Casio MT68, that was microtuning. And on the Casio SK1, it's having portamento as well as envelope selection. Portamento is the tones sliding from pitch to pitch. As far as I can tell, you can't change the portamento speed, but it's still fun having that on there. And then the envelopes can be selected by hitting the envelope button and then pressing the corresponding key on the keyboard. Some envelope shapes might not have been intended for certain instruments, but it can be fun to have like a pluck for the piano or adding just a lot of sustain to the brass ensemble. And as long as we're talking about sounds, let's not forget one of the staple features of these goofy older toy keyboards. I'm talking about drum patterns. Fun little drum patterns. So the SK1 seems pretty fun, right? I mean, there's not really a lot you could fault it for, so it must be easy to recognize. Wait, what's that?
It wasn't me.
Curses. Modern technology.
Josh, you fool. If someone already owns a computer or smartphone, there is no need to get a Casio SK1.
Well, obviously, but I think that part of the appeal here is the quirkiness and the sort of lo-fi nature of the SK1 compared to, using a computer, which is objectively just a more powerful sampling device.
Okay, that is fair.
That's something to keep in mind if you're thinking about getting an SK1. If you just want to play back samples polyphonically, I mean, there are better ways to do it. If you have a computer already, you can download a DAW or just, a free trial of a DAW so you don't have to spend any money. Pop some samples in or sample something through your computer microphone, and there you go. It's going to be far more fully featured and more powerful. It's going to be sequenceable in your DAW. It's you get the SK1 because you want the crunchy, lo-fi, kind of goofy nature of it. And kind of on that topic, prices for the SK1 I think are not too crazy, considering that it's a pretty iconic little keyboard and it has been used by artists like Beck and Nine Inch Nails. I think that paying, I'd say around $100 or less for it, that's a pretty good, fair price for what you're getting. But again, if all you want is to just grab some samples, play them back chromatically, DAW, pop the samples in, it's going to work way better. Ultimately, I think the Casio SK1 is a fun keyboard that's not a necessity for anyone. These older keyboards just have a specific charm to them. And I think that, the more that I use synths like the Prologue over here and the Matriarch behind me that have these really like thick, fat analog tones, which, don't get me wrong, I love thick, fat analog tones. I think there's something to be said for a device that does not try to sound like that. And of course, the SK1 is not like a new product. I don't think that there was some Casio executive sitting in a room thinking, well, I hope that YouTubers some, few decades from now are going to look at this and think, man, this is a nice alternative to analog synths. But I do think that it's good to consider, what the appeal is now. How is it contextualized within the modern synth/sampler market? And in that sense, I think the Casio SK1 is fun and quirky and different and probably not really necessary for anyone, but that's okay. Now we're at the end of the video, and as a thanks to you for sticking around, I've made a sample pack with the SK1, sort of. So I took samples that I've already made and sampled them into the SK1 to give them just a little bit of, a little bit of grime, a little bit of dirt. And then I took samples of those samples, so I resampled the resampling to create what I'm calling the sample pack. You get it? It's pay what you want, so if you feel so inclined to, kick a couple bucks towards it to help support the channel, it's much appreciated, but, please don't feel pressured to do so. Before we close out, I feel like we should do a nice little ending jam with the SK1. Before we start that, again, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video and you haven't already, please consider leaving a like, hitting subscribe. And since the SK1 is like so popular, I'm wondering, leave in the comments if you have any experience with it, opinions on it, or any questions about it. I'd love to hear from people. Anyway, we'll close off with a little jam, and thanks again. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.